All right. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, fellow autonomizers. How's everyone doing today? So my name is Carlos Venegas, and I welcome you to Do It Live Autonomy podcast. Today, we will be discussing a recurring theme that has just been resonating with me since week one. And even yesterday in Richard's lecture, it came about again while he discussed how to build a productive skill set. And that recurring theme has been the trivium. So I really wanted to get started first with my understanding of the trivium and how I kind of came across it. So to me, the trivium obviously is made up of logic, grammar, and rhetoric. But what is that, right? And I've defined it as logic, the art of thinking, what here in autonomy people have referred to as input or your inbox, depending on how people are using it, which is the second, the middle part of the Do It Live that I want to get into. But so to me, I've learned to define it in my mind so I can grasp it and understand it as logic, the art of thinking, and grammar, the art of creating symbols, putting them together to form thoughts. A great example of this is our alphabet. You know how they're all symbols. We put them together, they form words. We put more of them together, they form sentences. So we put our thoughts together. And a recurring theme in a lot of our lectures has been processing, right? So once you're able to think, you utilize our five senses, then what happens after that? Well, the next step is processing, is where planning takes place. And I think that this was also discussed in yesterday's lecture as well. And finally, rhetoric. And rhetoric, and the way I've defined it, is relaying those thoughts from one mind to another mind. And yesterday's lecture also brought that point up very well, specifically in a slide that Richard had, where he had wrote down there, business is communication. So I thought that was, I had never looked at it that way, but without communication, how can you communicate your offer or your, whether it has value or not to others? So that slide really, I found it very important. And so I definitely wanted to include that in my definition of logic, grammar, and rhetoric. So with that said, I kind of wanted to open it up to the class here, and I'm kind of curious to hear how you learn to understand and define the trivium, because I think this is extremely important as we move forward and build these productive, high-value skill sets that in order to solve problems in the future. So would anyone like to, I guess, start with their understanding of the trivium and how they've come to define it?
I'll jump in. I think I got introduced when Richard kind of first got going with the trivium. I think that was like 2010 or 2011, something like that. That certainly attracted me to that. Primarily, I think the thing that I heard initially was the idea of learning, and like a method of learning, that once you learn that, you could learn anything. And that definitely resonated with me. The other day, I think it was in I'm not sure if it was last week's Q&A, but Richard brought out that sheet of different terminology for different arenas, engineering versus medicine versus, some of the other methodologies or specialties, and how the trivium relates in the language. It's different for different things, but again, it's it's like one of those things where it's simple and they've made it complex, and so being able to like go back to simple, to me, is really essential to understanding. And I definitely, as far as a project manager in my career, I related to a lot of different people, from people that are like blue collar out in the field type workers to white collar and executive level, and having that vocabulary and being able to explain it in their terms, I think is certainly something that is, very important. And in a lot of cases, like you were saying about communication, it's, communication can get screwed up real easily with the wrong terminology. And so, this is definitely a way to like simplify it and make it so that, for the most part, people can understand.
No, that's great, Miguel. I always like your perspective on things and how you can really bring a real life experience to it. Is there anyone else that would like to give it a go?
For me, the trivium. Well, first of all, is there a lot of background noise right now?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. So I first heard about the trivium through Mark Passio, and at first I didn't like think of it as much. The thing that stood out to me was I was like, my method of learning was by doing. So this, the trivium, it enlightened me to just seek out the grammar first, and that was a piece of the puzzle I was missing to really get all the grammar like an emerald would, and then process it. And I came to find that the processing part is sort of natural. It's just like let's say I learn about, I don't know, something, and then the next day, like I'll have a better understanding of it just because it's sat in, like the information sat in my head, and I kind of just took what was the best parts out of it. And then of course the action part, I was already familiar with that, but yeah, that's it just makes so much sense to act when we have the grammar first. So then I heard it from Richard, and then I asked people, hey, have you ever heard of the trivium? And they said no. So I knew this was important, and the more times I kept hearing about it, is the more sense it made to me. So it's very important.
Yes, and to kind of go off of the point that you made there with grammar, it's usually where our planning and our strategy, kind of our processing, is all worked out. And so if we want to do some action, we need to ensure that our plan and our strategy is set, like our goals and things like that. So when we do have action, we know what direction to kind of go towards. So yeah, it's definitely very important in getting our goals accomplished, for sure. Is there anyone else that would like to have their discuss their definition of the trivium, and maybe provide an example of how they've utilized it in their life? Okay, well, with that, I definitely have
I'll speak up, Carlos.
Okay.
I got sick kid and solo parenting, and I wanted to share though. So I first heard about the trivia method, jumping in out of rabbit holes from Mark Passio in his presentation. And I was like, from passively just consuming, conspiracy theory and that really stood out to me as something substantial. So I like Googled it. I think I went to John's Trivium site and then jumped in and out of his resources, and then came across Richard talking about it. And that was when it was really delivered in a simplified manner in order for me to, really recognize how valuable this was. And then I found the resources, and this is like almost 10 years ago now, but the recommended readings were like painful for me. I dropped out of school, and my method of learning back then was just trying something until I got frustrated and then giving up. And then sometimes I would try again. Oftentimes I would never try again. But so there was like no method there other than frustration. And so diving into the Trivium resources was a huge undertaking for me to like read these really big books and with big words. And they recommended rereading things like 3 times, books like 3 times. And so I did that, and each time it soaked in a little bit more, and then I'd learn about logic and listen to Peikoff, and it'd soak in a little bit more. And so over the span of 10 years, I did start to like develop the foundation of understanding what it really was, and then the practical use, like how it actually, is used in my life, not just like this understanding of higher educational topics, but and then helping Richard out and really helping him out with autonomy and seeing how the trivia method is reflected in that, but also helping him out with the critical thinking trifecta, and then helping him out with the productions. That he just does. Him and Paul Verge just did such a good job of like simplifying. All right, there's a lot to this, but this is the core of it. This is the essence, and this is the practical use. And so you hear Richard, he speaks about it a lot still, just even in this last lecture last night, of input, processing, output. Like, get that understanding, and then you can attach deeper knowledge. You can go as far down into the rabbit hole of Trivium method history as you want, but being able to just understand that, and that you're not in just one area at one time. You're constantly hopping back and forth between the 3, depending upon the situation and how you are in need. And so now I can see myself, at my workstation day by day, and just ripping through topics. What is this? I don't know what it is. Let's research it. Okay, I have a basic understanding of it. Let's try things out. Nope, that didn't work. What are the contradictions here? Like, okay, this worked. And now I want to share it with like the autonomy community, right? And because that then further cements my understanding of it, and kind of blazing the trail to make things easier for those behind me, as it was done for me. I feel an obligation to do that. So that whole process is like kind of like what I do at a breakneck speed now. And looking back, I've over the last 10 years, the amount of growth that I've experienced is unmeasurable, and I have no clue, where I'm going to be in 5 years with the momentum, the resources, the understanding, and the confidence. I think that's one of the most important parts, that I can learn anything. Like I can not be intimidated, or come up to these pearly gates that like, oh, that knowledge is on the other side and you don't have access because of your class, your the amount of money you make. But especially with technology today and access to knowledge, I am confident I can learn anything that I come across, and it shows in my day-to-day.
Well, I've definitely been in that boat as well, Joshua. For many years, I was like and Dave, you'll appreciate this one. I was like a boat without a rudder, and I hit the rocks often. And I mean, I still do, but now as I learn to master this skill set, you know, it truly is like a, you know, now you put a rudder on your boat and you can navigate better the waterways to avoid those rocks. So yes, definitely. So before we move on to the next clip that I have, if anyone else wants to.
Yes, I'll go. I'd like to go, Carlos, and thank you, Joshua. That, you know, 10 years doing this and hitting rocks doing this over time. This is all so new to me. I can hardly weigh in with experience with the trivium, although my language might be different. I'm an experiential learner, but so thank you for helping me recognize that language is so new for me that I'm still learning, and I listen and learn, but I have to say I'm still such a beginner here, and I'm excited to learn more about the language being used here. But I'm sure it's you know, the input, processing, and output part is no doubt my language might be a little different, but thank you. And I appreciate the rudder analogy. Thank you.
Well,
So,
awesome, great.
And I wanted to add something, Carlos. I mean, Joshua's got a sick kid and he came on video and provided all that value. And I was sitting there thinking, I got this this thing I mentioned in the lecture last night from Gino Denning about the trivium, and I have to do this other project for Chris because I have a trivium lecture coming up, these sort of things. So I have to cut like a 3-minute promo. So I'm going to do it live. I'm going to share it with you guys, but we can also multi-purpose it as a clip. And I know that excites Joshua that I'm getting things done because of his inspiration. I came inside, I booted up the studio because at first I was like, oh, let me use my phone. I'm like, no, I should just go down, boot up the studio. And his comment was long enough that I could come in here, boot it up real quick. So I will start here with something we looked at. Oh no, did it go wrong? Did it go wrong? Oh, here we go. Book cam. Let's zoom out. We looked at this Trivium Rosetta Stone, and you have different worlds of thinking, and then you have different worlds of putting those individual parts together. So there's the world that exists, and then there's the epistemology, the names we give to the things, and then how those things fit together, and then how we actually take action, use, and troubleshoot such different categories. So as an example, the trivium method can be learned not only to learn, it can be used not only to learn anything, but it can be used to talk to people across various expertise and disciplines, which makes it very useful. Because oftentimes the philosopher can't talk to the scientist, or the doctor can't talk to the engineer, or none of these people can understand the military and these sort of things. So if you understand they're all operating on the same process, it's an input processing and output process that starts with a reality, and then you start processing it and you get useful decisions, choices, actions you can take. So in traditional religio philosophy, you would have Kabbalah, right? So it starts with the world of emanation, goes to the world of creation, to the world of formation, to the world of manifestation. That's probably the most abstract for most people because they're not familiar with that process. Here's one: scientific method. This is a little bit more understandable. Observation, hypothesis, extrapolation, repeatable experiment. So the rhetoric is the repeatable experiment. The extrapolation and the hypothesis are based on the individual parts of the observation. In medicine, you have the examination, the diagnosis, the prognosis, and then the treatment. The rhetoric is the treatment. That's what the actions are from these initial information gathering and processing and removing of contradiction processes. In philosophy, you have metaphysics, the things that exist; epistemology, the words we use to describe the things that exist; ethics, how we formulate deciding whether or not to take action in the world. Is it going to have a deleterious effect on other people's freedom? And then aesthetics, what that looks like. It's a lifestyle of freedom if you love philosophy, if you love the truth. Engineering and design. Observation, start with that which exists. Hey, we can make this better. Blue sky planning, let's build the bridge. Blueprint the plan, here's how to build the bridge. Begin construction on the bridge, right? We can see this on the road every day when we're in traffic. Military tactics, time to define battle objectives. There's something out there, we want it. Time to think, how are we going to get it? Time to plan, who we're going to need, what do we need to bring to get it? Time to execute plan. This is the rhetoric. So most people don't have the rhetoric part, or the active literacy part is that gets you to the rhetoric and gets you into action. So understanding the Rosetta Stone, very useful in understanding the trivium. Now, the other reason I got on camera is when the question came up, I actually realized I have a trivium shirt on. So this is not the grammar, logic, and rhetoric version. This is the freedom exists because of non-aggression, physical self-defense, intellectual self-defense, these concepts. Same formation as the trivium. Now, the trivium means where three roads come together. It's the meeting of three roads. What are these three roads and what's in the center of it? So it's grammar, logic, and rhetoric. And what's in the middle of that is truth. Truth is not grammar. Truth is not logic. Truth is not rhetoric. But when you have these things in combination without contradiction, then you can find truth. So it's a method to find truth. Why do you want to find truth? So you can take action and have predictable results with successful outcomes consistently. This is how we survive in the world, right? So I have here a letter. Here, come here. We'll cut this part for the, but Lucas was in here. He wanted to say hi.
Hi.
Yeah, he heard me working. I didn't tell him I was coming into work for a minute. I'll see you in a minute. Oh, we were in the backyard playing. We had some Legos going on. All right, so this other folder, let me make sure I don't dox them. That wouldn't be nice. And do I have a paper clip? I should always keep a paper clip. I'll just focus it in like this. You can see the title. You can see everything except I don't want to share the email. Here's book cam. All right, now we're going to zoom in. Now, my question, this is from 2011. So I guess before I get to this, let me go back to this. I first heard of the classical trivium. It's been around for thousands of years. It's been used by states, kingdoms, religions to condition their people. If the state or the collective unit is in control of the method of instruction, it's indoctrination. They choose what you learn, how long, and what the outcome is. So there's always kind of been state-sponsored indoctrination, just not the same as what we've had in school over the past couple of years. So externally, if you don't know what it is and it's used against you, it's like a weapon, right? So it's not a good thing. However, in the 20th century, some thinking emerged, and it was called the trivium method. And it's actually interesting because it goes back to some of the intellectuals in the Moot and the Round Table and people that were close to Cecil Rhodes. The trivium method is a way to emancipate yourself from that control system, learn how to learn anything for yourself, which is the greatest gift you can give, and then learn about the individual parts, how they fit together, how to remove the contradictions, because there are no contradictions in reality. There's only misunderstandings, misinterpretations of evidence yet to be discovered, these sort of things, right? And then you can get down to a conclusion, a judgment, and action, be able to take measures in life consistently with predictable outcomes. So with that method, in the power of the minds of human beings, it is liberating, it is empire crushing, it is everything that wipes away all the dirt of the indoctrination and leaves us able to sprout new roots and new branches and grow and learn and grow in the right direction. All these sort of things that we need as human beings to overcome the challenges they've set up. Right before this podcast, was listening to Murray Rothbard at Mises back in 1991. And there was a quote in there about 47 minutes in, and he said, the environmentalist movement, as it existed back then, defined humanity as the enemy. They are the enemy of humanity. And I was like, wow, that's really prescient, because within a year, you have Agenda 21, you've got the Club of Rome announcement, and that humanity is the problem, these sort of things, right? So being able to move forward with the historical context and then the practical context of knowing the history isn't the solution, learning our way out depends on this method. Now, with that, I had a question for Gene, and it read, I was making this notice. He had a definition of reality, and I thought it was really clever because I'd never met anybody who had an actual definition of existence or reality, a working definition that was understandable and usable and these sort of things. So I was kind of fascinated by that. And so then I was comparing it to the great books of the Western world, which I had learned about and started reading right before Gene came on the scene with this trivium method and the history behind it and the Lost Tools of Learning by Dorothy Sayers. She was part of the Moot and the Round Table group kind of coterie back then. That's the interesting part of that historically. So he comes on the scene and I'm like, okay, this is very similar. It's like a boiled down version of the long form of these great books of the Western world and Aristotle and the early thinkers and these sort of things, right? So then I noticed that his definition of reality, which I had kept testing to see if it is, like, is this the thing that you can depend on? Is it consistent? I had noticed that Aristotle's 10 categories matched up perfectly to his definition. So I was like, hey, hold on one second, buddy. I was like, do you have knowledge of like you made up this definition or you got it from his mentors, which were also an interesting story, right? One of his mentors was a Freemason. One of his mentors was in some other group that had some knowledge, right? So, and he had traveled around the world to all these libraries to read these books. So very articulate, astute observer of reality, a rigorous user of the methodology himself. It worked really well. Very easy to communicate with the man, very easy for him to teach you what he had learned, right? These sort of things. So now I'm going to zoom in. Let's see if I can get his answer on screen here. Oh, wrong button. All right. He says, Rich, I've seen two closely related explanations of Aristotle's 10 categories. One, the categories include all ideas comprehensible by man. So that's a pretty big deal. The categories include all possible subjects and predicates, that is, all existent items and everything which can be expressed or said about them, which is also impressive. My personal basic orientation consists of a statement with which you are familiar and to which I was introduced immediately prior to being given Aristotle's categories for study. So here's his definition. Reality is every substance, action, relationship, and attribute which is, was, or ever will be. So then when you compare what are Aristotle's 10 categories, it's basically these things. He says, if you compare those concepts to the 10 categories, you'll find that they are more inclusive, condensed, and easier to remember. I mentally recite this line as I begin my systematic, critical, or creative thought process. I then proceed with the complete trivium method, or what you reference as the 5 W's plus how, because that's what the trivium method is meant to answer. If you have those 6 points of information, you have like a 3-dimensional point in space that's like an understandable piece of knowledge. This is lacking in journalism for like our entire lives, right? The term substance, by the way, is defined as that which stands as an entity to be perceived and that which is the entity's ideal or lawful foundation. So substance is something that exists in reality, and you can exchange reality and existence in this definition. The law which is mentioned is the natural law which defines a design of that entity, and the ideal is the mentation held of that entity by the rational being. Once rational being is introduced into the soup of the universe as co-creator, concepts which derive from percepts must be included in the general term, substance. Now we can circle back to the Pythagorean notion that all that exists is matter and mind. I know these subtleties can be initially confusing, but with a bit of practice, contemplation, and meditation, this means of basic orientation can serve well, right? So with that, you have some words from the gent who brought the trivium method to, as far as I'm concerned, Western civilization, because nobody was reading Dorothy Sayers or these other obscure pieces. And no one had passed around like he had the master key to unlock all the prison doors. And he came on the scene and he's like, try it out. And then we started trying it. I'm like, wow, this is really good. And we pass it around to each other. Hey, it works. And we can talk to each other cogently because we're going to talk about meaningful, substantial things that exist. And we know what existence starts with, right? And then we can go in and we can parse that and we can test it for truth or fact, right? This was a big deal up to AI. Like this was a necessary thing that wasn't being implemented in people's thinking. And now you've got AI, which is even more, magicians and trickery and all this stuff to see if something's real or a deep fake, right? It was hard enough for people to pick up on the process and use it because it was being hidden systematically. Now, how long has it been systematically hidden? That's a good question. I have a letter over here. If you give me a second, I'll grab it for you because it's better than me just going.
Well, also to add to that, the trivium really is the art of learning the mind, and the quadrivium is matter, mind and matter. So kind of very similar to how you ended your.
Well, if you don't mind, it won't matter. That's the gist. All right, so here's the quote, and this is from a book called 100 Most Influential Books Ever Written, because I'm a nerd. History of Thought from Ancient Times to Today. And I read this book probably 20 years ago, and page 48, 49. Let me put my spectacles back on. All right, so context. Aristotle is the teacher of Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great's dad was Philip of Macedon. He's the most powerful person in the world. He's out there conquering civilizations, and he hears that Aristotle's got a new book on the market. He's doing a little book tour. He's telling people, and they're really excited. And he writes this scathing note to him. Alexander to Aristotle, greeting. You have not done well to publish your books on oral doctrine. What is there now that we can excel others in? If those things which we have been particularly instructed in be laid open to all. For my part, I assure you, I'd rather excel others in the knowledge of what is excellent than the extent of my power and dominion. Farewell. So he's saying you can't teach the slaves to read, bro. You can't teach these people to think. If they know how we rule over them, how are we going to rule over them? This is a big problem thousands of years ago. It was a big problem for Chinese emperors. It was a big problem for Roman emperors. It was a big problem for the men who were the only property owners in Greece and their democracy. Like, this has been a problem for a long time. We inherit that problem. And if we don't look at the history to understand it, that's shame on us. If we don't have the tool to analyze that history, that's shame on them until we got it back. And now it's shame on us for not sharing it further, wider, explaining it to more people, giving them more tools to use it, and finding the veracity and reality in the substance is the stuff that they occult. That's what they hide. They hide it because it's powerful. It closes the knowledge gap, the power gap, the wealth gap. If you have this type of method between your ears, you can challenge their status quo. You can grow in the right direction. So that's my gist on the trivium, since you asked. Good show
Thank
so
you,
far,
Richard.
Carlos.
Thank you. That was amazing. Much appreciated. A great segue to the meat of what's next, which is how can it be used, or how have you guys been using it this week, since Do It Live is really about, how have, what's going on this, this week in autonomy. So I guess I can start with, and I wanted to start with a clip. So if you just give me some time here, I'm going to share my screen.
Well, I think the easy way to say that is that your head is for having ideas, not for holding them. And I don't know how long I'm going to be preaching this, but most people, even very successful people and people who have to some degree applied these principles, they're still using their psyche as their system. And your psyche sucks as a system. It's a terrible office. It'll tend to remind you of things based upon how recent they were or how much emotional content you have tied to them. And that's not exactly the most strategic or fun way to make choices about where you put your focus and attention and how you point yourself. So basically, this is a model that allows you to offload remembering and reminding off your psyche, because that's something it does not do very well. And so offloading it also means that it will come back up if you don't have a trusted place and a trusted way to engage with what you've offloaded. So offloaded does not mean go unconscious, go numb, or forget. Offload means I have now appropriately stuck these over here, put them in the right place, trust that I or the right people will look at this at the right time and be reminded of what they need to be reminded of. In other words, that I've got the maps that I need to see. If I'm going to go sail a big sailing trip, I better make sure I've got the maps for the harbor, so I can see the little rocks there, and I've got the big map that's showing where I'm going, and I need all those different kind of maps. And I'm not going to do that in my head. Come on. And most people have a life much more complex than sailing a boat. And so.
All right. So another boat analogy. But so I guess this next segment that I wanted to get, I played that because now I want to move into, well, how can we use the trivia method now to get things done, to move forward? And so like I've been applying the trivia method in my organization. Like I've been really working towards organizing my life, my personal life, and that also includes my inbox. And so they also use a very similar method. It's the input, a processing, output, and that's what David Allen is kind of getting at in that meeting he had with Richard there. So I wanted to, ask the group here in this week, how have you been applying the trivia method to in your life?
All right, I just realized I got a Trivium shirt on too.
Nice.
It's dark in my closet in the morning, so this is what came out of it. But how I've been using the trivia method this week, right now I'm like laser focused on ChatGPT, its capabilities, how to use it, how to rapidly use it in multiple situations in my life, business, parenting, life hacking. And I, just like what David Allen said, like I was getting these like really powerful prompts. I was coming across them, copying them, and then putting them in my Evernote. And but they weren't like readily available for me when I knew they were starting to get all over the place. So I created a Notion page, and I knew what I needed in my mind, and basically have like categories, and then they toggle and open up, and in that category is going to be prompts all the way down for that category. So now I have a place to get these things out of my head, so I don't have to like remember them, but I know where to go. You know, I have a shortcut on my phone, it's on my computer. I can jump right in there, grab these tools as needed in order to use them effectively for research, and then for everything else that I'm doing in the week. But that's a really core kind of grammar step of having these tools, knowing that they're in the toolbox, and I don't have to go looking for these tools when I need them, forgetting about or getting unfocused on what the task is at hand. But I can just rapidly move forward when I have a few moments, taking care of the kid, taking care of the family, taking care of the businesses, to be able to actually make progress. And it is showing, like in the last 2, maybe 3 weeks, I've like, I went from having a course for, you know, the trivia method, using the trivia method in ChatGPT, to now I'm working my way up the funnel, as you guys will learn, to having smaller pieces of value down to a free lead magnet. So I've built each of those steps, and now I'm rolling them out, testing them out in the community, seeing what the engagement's like. But I'm able to like rapidly do these things, and I'm excited to show everybody in these coming weeks how you guys can rapidly do these things too, using all this new AI tech, and, you know, basic understanding, what Richard's going to teach about of these digital assets, and how to use them to grow your audience. But this momentum is really because of the trivia method, that I'm able to take rapid action with the overall plan to deploy these things while I'm parenting, while I'm running, you know, multiple businesses, and still making progress.
Wow, Joshua, the synchronicity in this Do It Live is amazing, because you know that's where I was going to next. That was my last point. There is really, and I mean, you kind of touched on it. You hit it right. You hit the nail right on the head there with how when you really deploy this trivia method, for lack of a better word, magic starts to happen. Like you'll get into things never thought of. Like an example that I have for myself, I always, you know, I had a mindset that I had told myself, you know, I just wasn't creative. I had nothing to do with poetry or whatever. But after I got acquainted with the trivium and I put some time into the trivium and understanding it, I started writing poetry for the first time in my life. And so the trivium will literally open your mind to unlimited possibilities. And well, I guess since we kind of brought it up, you know, I wanted to put that on the table now, and I'm kind of really curious to see if anyone else has had a similar experience with deploying the trivia method, and you know, being surprised by that.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for doing this, Carlos. I am just going to piggyback on what everybody's been saying, because it is very synchronistic, and I'm just thankful for the way the course is, because it kind of has been cool how my confidence in myself and getting my mindset in the right place kind of prepared me for applying the trivia method. And that is just using some video editing software tools outside of what I was used to. I was using Adobe to do some things over the years, and I just wanted to try to find a way to do things differently. And what's been really great, and I'm wondering if you can comment on this, when it comes to applying the trivium, is it's really been other people's input too, like being able to actually collaborate. So I don't know if that's part of the trivium or quadrivium, like having mentorship, having when you are learning new skills, like being able to ask questions, like having access to people who already know certain tools to just be able to ask a question or get some input in. It's amazing how when I have been learning the video editing skills, just being able to just ask a quick question, how it just like totally helps to keep moving me forward. And I didn't know if that was like part of the trivia method, because so far what I've learned, it's like all yourself, you're learning what you're capable of doing. But is there an element to the trivia that is mentorship? Because it seems like being a part of this community, I'm more active, more efficient with my time, my sales stay full, my inspiration stays full. So I didn't know if there was like a part to that.
Well, what came to mind while you were saying that is the processing part of, or what people refer to as the grammar part of the trivium, where that's where you start processing things and you start realizing if you're processing things correctly, you start finding, okay, I might need these resources, and resources can be mentors, can be, you invest in a course or whatnot, but that's you doing it. You're applying you're thinking, and you're seeing, okay, I need this or I need that, and so you're making a strategy. And I would say, I mean, what comes to my mind is that you are deploying the trivium in doing that, because you're finding the most effective way to get to wherever it is you want to go.
Yeah, thank you for that.
And I would add, you get a bunch of individuals with these tools and they create support for one another, and it really rocket fuels the whole individual experience, because we're much stronger all together, but we all need to be strong individual parts.
Yes, I think I think that's something that's really coming across strong to me with the whole mastermind group, is so powerful. I mean, you could just feel it. It's amazing people that we're all on a similar journey, and when we really put our energy and focus in a very harmonious way, I mean, amazing things happen. I think that I mean, I first read about the mastermind groups through Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich, and in that book it says that when you have a group like that get together in harmony, in complete harmony, where there's no judgment or no negativity and things like that, I mean, you really tap into what he called, or the mastermind, that other mind that's there. And so, and that's where really like huge breakthroughs can happen, that can have amazing effects for the future. Not only now, but also for the future, I would say.
Yeah, I'll just chime in a little. There's a book called John Boyd, The Fighter Pilot Who Changed the Art of War. And in that, he describes kind of the idea that, as a fighter pilot, what he described as the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, act. It was like what they had to do to learn quickly. But and to a large degree, he was like an application guy. He didn't know anything about the trivium. He just saw the situation in the environment and understood that you had to learn quickly when you're a fighter pilot. If you make mistakes, you're going to be dead quickly. So you've got to have a learning model that is super quick. And that's what he came up with, was the OODA loop. But then later on, as he became more of a military strategist, he put out an essay called I think it's called Creation and Destruction. And essentially it is like what Rich talked about last night, in that induction and deduction, and that like going from
I think let's see here. I think we might have lost Miguel there. Well, what's really interesting, again, the synchronicities, they are amazing. which leads me to my next clip, which kind of throws in what Joshua kind of brought up and a little bit about what Miguel was kind of getting to with the whole fighter pilot analogy, is personality types and how we can come together to form highly effective teams, because that's also something that Richard has touched on these lectures. So with that said, I'll go ahead and play this final clip here.
Us out real quick before we go to intermission breakout rooms here. Let me see. All right, so this is like a pie chart. And in the pie chart, I have some pearl, I have some emerald, and down here, I'm gonna have to make 2 more, and it's like ruby and sapphire. I need to work on those sometimes. But I'm mostly pearl and emerald, but that doesn't always pay the bills. Maybe you're giving out more than you're taking in. You need to have a little bit of ruby to assert yourself and say, hey, can I get these invoices paid, please? Right? Because that's what maybe Ryan's lacking. He's spending time in pearl and emerald making a great business, but if he doesn't do the ruby part of reaching out and saying, hey, I exchanged a bunch of value, can you send me some Federal Reserve notes or some Bitcoin or something, right? And then the other part, sapphire, maybe I need to think bigger and get more outside of myself, and that'll help the emerald and the pearl actually find its balance in the world. But if you have like a lot of heart and mind into something, but you're not willing to go do the outreach and the marketing, people are never going to find out about your great ideas. So maybe that's an idea, that's an area that I need to widen out. And it's just purely accidental. It turned out to be a peace sign. All right, Nick, you ready to go to
All right, so I wanted to end with that final clip there, because I think it kind of brings everything together, right? Now that we, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so now that we've kind of talked about the trivia method, how it can be deployed into not only our personal lives, but in our business, and also just how to work together with people. I think I wanted to play that clip because I think it's extremely important in as we grow and maybe work with other people, how we can identify personality types to become even more productive in our teams. So does anyone have anything to say in regards to that clip? Anything that came to mind?
I think what wonderful high value here, Carlos, overall. And that's exactly what that sign was. Overall, we need all of those elements to make the whole. And I like the peace part.
Yeah, another synchronicity, right? Isn't it? It's just amazing.
I'm back. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, I'm glad. Yeah, I'm
me.
glad you're back, Miguel. You got cut off there, but I wanted to play that clip because I think going off of what Joshua said, you were kind of touching upon personality type and the fighter pilot, and I think that kind of led us right into that little segment.
Yeah, well, I mean, the final point I wanted to make is that that going back and forth between inductive and deductive reasoning from the big picture to the little picture and the little detail, that's essentially that trivium methodology where you're going from rhetoric and kind of explaining the whole process, going down to the grammar, the individual parts and pieces and how they fit together. And that essay by Boyd talks about this idea of like destruction, not necessarily being blowing things up but taking things apart and putting pieces together in new ways, created that circumstance where you can have really awesome creativity. And I think in a community of people that have those skills, and it just like we burst with creative solutions to problems that otherwise just don't get recognized. And, you know, the way the rest of the world is going with communication and stuff, and artificial communication to a large degree, the less real communication is happening. And, you know, like the ability to trust the communication becomes less. And because of that, things slow down. And we really have the ability to kind of go in the opposite direction. And that's going to put us in a really advantageous situation.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with you, Miguel. So that concludes the Do It Live. But before I did want to touch upon some of the amazing activities that are taking place on the forum here, because there are so many. I mean, just tomorrow, Miguel, since maybe you should kind of touch on this or talk about this. We have Autonomy Toasters bright and early. And did you want to say anything in regards to that, Miguel?
Yeah, well, I'll be really brief because I know you got to get going. But yeah, it's just, you know, basically the art of practicing public speaking and having other people to give you, you know, expert, thoughtful feedback to improve your presentation.
Awesome. We also have obviously our Sunday Q&A, which I'm looking forward to. May and the Magic Bullet afterwards. That's awesome as well. I haven't had the opportunity to attend that course, but and then in the evening we have Grand Theft World podcast for those of you who want to get the news of the week. And then moving forward, we just have an extremely busy schedule with project mindset tips and techniques, which I attend on a weekly basis. It's amazing. And so many more. I mean, there's just so many that it's kind of hard to go over each one. So with that said, is there anyone else that would like to share any closing remarks before I do the outro play?
I'll just point out that we're doing something unique this season, and that's that gatekeeper exercise that's going to come up on Tuesday. So I'd encourage people to certainly attend that, because that's kind of a new angle that we're bringing out there, and I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, that one, and another one that I found extremely valuable that I definitely want to attend is the technology, the AI tech that's coming out. I think they're having a discussion. Joshua mentioned that earlier today. Super interesting. I definitely need to make that. So we have a busy schedule this week, and I just hope that everyone takes advantage wherever they feel they need to. And with that said, here's the outro.
Ready, set, go.